everybody, and welcome back to another brand new video where today we're looking at the fan reaction to The Haunting of Villa Diodati. So yes, of course, this is my continuing series that I've been doing for every episode of Series 12 so far, so if you haven't missed any of them, do go check them out, where every single week I look at all your comments, all your messages about each episode, and kind of collate them, select a few to kind of read out and discuss, just to kind of get an overall reflection of what you, the fans, thought about each episode of Doctor Who. So of course this week we reach episode 8, the Lone Cyberman story. Certainly, I think it's fair to say a pretty well-loved story, and I think as we'll find through this video, it definitely got a pretty positive response, I think. So we won't waste any time, we'll get stuck straight in with our first comment, which comes from Alex Richardson, who says, "Jodie absolutely nailed it tonight, by far her best performance to date. I loved seeing her darker side in this episode. The historical setting was great and the supporting cast were too. I loved the companions' costumes, particularly Graham's. I called that it was a Cyberman just before the reveal when they were looking out the window at it. The new design looked fantastic. I liked the idea of it not fully upgrading whoever it was under the suit. It was an interesting concept, and I hope it is explored more in the finale. The companions were great. Graham was my favourite tonight. I can't really think of much wrong with this. I'd say it's up with Spyfall Part 1 and Fugitive of the Judoon. All three new writers this series have done great, but this is the best of those episodes. 9.5 out of 10. Bring on the finale. I'm so excited." So there we go, straight away a very, very positive response and reaction to the episode, which I feel like was generally kind of how people felt, at least immediately after it, was very much an exciting, positive buzz off this really excellently well-written, exciting Cyberman story that very much sets things up for the finale, which I think is the key thing as well. So it's kind of all going to be so heavily interlinked into the next two episodes that it really creates many exciting prospects. And I do agree that I think it's up there with the best of this series, with Spyfall, the sort of reveal at the end of Spyfall Part 1. Well, a lot of that episode anyway, and as mentioned, Fugitive of the Judoon as well, which was pretty shocking and exciting at the time as well. So I definitely feel like it sits there up with those really, really good episodes. Now, our next comment here comes from Paige Lewis, who says, "Loved it. The creepy mystery aspect, the companions actually doing stuff, the big moral ethics lesson on letting Shelley die to save the future, the Doctor alluding to her past / Bill, Jodie's getting proper meaty stuff to act with was so important that I loved the part about it all coming on the Doctor to make the hard decisions. Hope they bring Maxine Alderton back for another episode because I enjoyed her writing. The Cyberman was a good, interesting design, especially with the fact that it was only half converted and had some emotions, which was just mwah. Wow, I actually did that in the video, gosh. One thing you can say about Chivers is that he really understands the classic monsters. Like, I've never been afraid of the Cyberman until this episode. The bit about him killing his children. So good. Hope it isn't just resolved next episode in some easy, predictable way. I feel like that's happened quite a few times this season and would be such a letdown after everything we've had so far." And so yes, identifying a lot of very good things about that episode there, but also commenting on the fact that this is very much an episode that I think is going to kind of be remembered better or worse depending on how the finale goes and how this whole Lone Cyberman storyline actually plays out, because it could go really well and be a really great finale and it all just turns into a kind of brilliant 3-episode arc to end Series 12, or it could all fall apart and be a complete disaster. Like, we just don't know at the moment, so I feel like we can all be very positive about this episode right now, but really it will all depend on the execution of the next two as to whether this is remembered as a truly great episode or just a very good one. Now, somebody who wasn't quite as much a fan of it is Random5555 even, who says, "It was a mixed bag for me. I think the shifts in tone were jarring and the ending was rushed. I love the Cyberman, but I felt like he should have showed up earlier in the episode so that we could understand more about Percy and the Cyberium. I also felt that the historical characters got pushed to the side, and I thought Mary was underused. I can't help but shake the feeling that Series 12 has a lot of fan service, which is a big change from Series 11. We've had the Master, Gallifrey, the Judoon, Captain Jack, a new Doctor, and Cybermen, all in the space of one series. I think Series 12 is buckling under the weight of too many story arcs, and it'll be a big struggle for Chibnall to tie all of those loose ends together in the finale. Fingers crossed." So it's a worthy comment there about the use of fan service in this series, which I'm not necessarily say it's all been done intentionally for fan service. I think the Captain Jack cameo is fan service, but apart from that, the use of the Master, the Judoon, Gallifrey, that's all very much intrinsically linked with storylines through these episodes, not just why don't we bring that person back because it'll be fun and it's the fans will want to see them again. So I don't have as much of a big problem with that as I think some people do. I feel like it was jarring in the last series having so little of it compared to previous series, and so I feel like it's nice we got back into that for this series. And in reality, only half the episodes have featured any returning anything really, because Orphan 55, the Tester episode, Praxis, and Can You Hear Me were all basically non-related to anything from the past. So I feel like that's quite good that there were the separate ones, but also the more ones where the fans can look back to the past and have these characters they remember and recognise. Now, next up, we have a comment from Lucas Dolding, who says, "We finally had some tension and drama between our main cast after 18 episodes of them boringly and unnaturally getting on just fine. This episode did also make me think that Jack's cameo was pretty pointless, but it did lead up to some tension within the group, so it more or less paid off in terms of character development. It's not the best Cyberman story, especially in comparison to the last one we had, What Enough Time the Doctor Falls, but it's not a terrible one either. We're also following up on it next episode, so we can't really compare it to others yet. I did think the tonal shift from when the Cyberman was introduced was a little jarring, because we had a nice spooky atmosphere going, and then it shifted all the focus on the Cyberman and it felt like a completely different story. The acting was pretty good, the dialogue wasn't completely terrible, there was good character drama, potentially a reference to the Capaldi era for once. This is definitely one of the best Whittaker episodes, up there with Demons and It Takes You Away. This is again somebody who wasn't quite so much a fan of it, but felt like it has its merits and it improved on a lot of the problems we've seen in the Chibnall era, and I think that's one of the critical things, is that this was just a lot better written or at least avoid some of the pitfalls that we've seen in a lot of previous episodes from this era. It just felt much more tightly knit. The script gave, as mentioned, the companions and Doctor a bit more conflict between them all and a bit more to work with. It was made a bit more meaty, I think. I do kind of get what you mean by the sort of change in vibe when the Cyberman's introduced, but I feel like that, and it maybe is a little bit jarring, but I don't think it's massively to the detriment of the story personally. I feel like it sort of is a reasonably good transition. Once we find out this is what they've all been kind of scared of and is causing all these problems in the house, it makes logical sense to move on to focus on that rather than the spooky house anymore. Now, next up, a comment from Doctor Who is Great, who says, I love this episode. I like how it masqueraded itself as a ghost story. It definitely subverted my expectations of what I thought this episode was aiming for. So much more than a simple ghost story, an excellent exploration of morality when considering how the companions' desires were unfulfilled and they had to back down due to the reality of the situation. It was a very intelligent episode. Let's hope this writer does more stories. Jodie was great in this, loved the Lone Cyberman. The fact that it was not complete had a greater impact. The humanity mixed with machine, very effective in the chill factor. I'm so excited for the finale. I feel Chibnall is really going to deliver now. 9 out of 10. I also like that where it feels like for the first 25 minutes, as mentioned in the previous comment, where it didn't work maybe so well for some, but for me personally, I felt it was quite good, that it felt like a ghost story, and almost, although I kind of knew the Lone Cyberman was probably going to come in this episode, I wasn't actually that convinced it was going to happen halfway through, because this story seemed to be so disconnected from that in the way it was going in terms of being a pure ghost story. So I was quite pleased that we suddenly kind of had that twist and that unexpected thing happening of suddenly, oh wow, it's the Lone Cyberman, it's here. Now we have another person who was not so much a fan of the episode, is Stev KYT, apologies if that's incorrectly pronounced or whatever, but who says, best of a really poor series? Not sure. Certainly a different Cyberman with emotions, despite canon suggesting otherwise. Whittaker still trying to act and failing once again, the Doctor interfering once again with history and interacting with pivotal characters in history. The Doctor disregarding Jack's warning. Not terrible, but still below average. I want this series to end even more than the last one. I found that quite surprising, that last line actually, because I feel like even people who haven't particularly liked this series or thought that generally the Chibnall era hasn't been very good, I feel like very few have thought that this series is worse than the previous one. It just, I feel like, for me personally, I think a lot of fans, it's just done a lot of things better in terms of being more exciting, having more of a arc and interconnected aspect to it, Jodie being better written as the Doctor and giving more to do. I feel like it's just, although it's not perfect, it has improved on a lot of the faults from the last series. So I do find that surprising to hear that they're even more looking forward to this one being done than the previous one. Now, we've got a great comment here from Joseph Simpson, who says, I watched it with my mum and brother who watch every episode but aren't as emotionally invested or analytical of the show as I am. My brother still let out a big oof of surprise when 13 said the team structure was mountainous. Following the fan, this series has been like watching Supercorp this season of Supergirl. The angst hurts and nourishes at the same time. Ryan's suggestion of sacrificing one life to save everyone else reminded me of when 10 asked the passengers in Midnight if they could actually throw out Sky, and they all say yes. I also got Hyde vibes throughout, and the ghostly Cyberman hovering over the lake reminded me of the impossible astronaut standing in Lake Silencio. The Bill shout was very well played, and we are inevitable makes perfect sense for this species. Was this written after Endgame, or is it coincidence? The Lone Cyberman is fascinating, and his rapport with 13 was strong from the get-go. I love the design, and his child murder boast is easily the episode's best line. My only problem is we'll likely never see Cybermen display these abilities, much like the super speed in Nightmare and Silver, but I can write that off. This is my favourite of the series thus far. So yes, certainly I really did enjoy the conflict we saw between sort of 13 and the companions, and her very much asserting the fact that she is so much higher than them in having to make decisions and take the difficult moments and deal with all that. I thought that was really, really well written and well played in this episode, and also the really dark Cyberman lines we had about killing children and whatnot. Like, that was proper dark. It was really, really good. Now, we've got a comment from Scott Formston, who says, I think this episode was one of my favourite of the season so far. The 13th Doctor was written brilliantly, and I think this was her defining episode. She was funny, she was clever, she was mysterious, and also a little bit of anger came through. In terms of the story, I felt it was one of the scariest in a long time, but the scariest part had to be the Cyberman. The design was absolutely fantastic, and I hope they use this sort of design again in a later season. Being able to see the human underneath made it absolutely terrifying. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that physical design of this version of the Cyberman was really, really cool and effective and creepy. I think it's such a creepy look. You can actually see the sort of half of their head. It's just, I feel like it really works so effectively in portraying the kind of horror of what happens to you when you become a Cyberman to an extent. And just working really sort of something different in this episode from what we've seen before, and having that little bit of emotion that they still sort of contained made them, I think, a really scary and angry threat throughout the episode. And so our final comment for today comes from Ryan Pollard, who says, "The Haunting of Villa Diodati might be my favourite episode of Series 12 so far. Being a perfect mixture of a historical haunted house story and a Cyberman story all in one, the concept was sound and executed really well, plus the Doctor was faced with a situation she couldn't sonic straight away. The design and acting of Ashad the Lone Cyberman was really effective and creepy, showcasing just how menacing the Cyberman can be. I had a strong feeling beforehand that this episode was going to pull a Utopia or Face the Raven style trick and be a massive glorified prologue for the final 2 episodes. Hopefully they will deliver and we don't end up getting another Battle of Ranskor Avkolos." And I couldn't agree with you more there, that the one thing we don't want from the next 2 episodes is another Battle of Ranskor Avkolos, because that would kind of destroy Series 12, I think, if the finale was as awful as that. But yes, thank you very much for all your comments, guys. I'm really pleased to see that I think generally that this episode has been very, very well received. For most people, probably their favourite episode so far of this series, or even of the Jodie Whittaker era as a whole, because it really just was that well written, well put together, well acted and performed and created, with a really good villain and a creepy setting. I think all the aspects and elements just finally came together in one episode of the Jodie era to really work perfectly, and I was so pleased to see that, and it's great to see the fans really enjoying it as well. So yes, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video with this little insight into the fan response to this episode. Of course, I will be back again to do 2 more of these videos for the last 2 episodes of the series, with Ascension of the Cybermen and the Timeless Children. I imagine there's going to be some quite interesting comments to come off the back of those episodes, I'm sure. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. Do let me know in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, hit that like button and that subscribe button if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye.